Oh, wow. Yeah.
This chair's back.
We're gonna go ahead and get started here. Who's my best whistler in the house? Do you have a good whistler? No? All right, cool, thank you. Excellent, well, thank you all for being here today. We're gonna go into our introductions and the more of, less of list in a minute. Again, as a reminder, as we do introduction, we're going to talk about what's our more of, what's our less of, and in one sentence, why. So that's just a little spoiler alert to it, but I want to turn the floor over to the mayor who can welcome and convene us. Thank you, Ina.
Yeah, so just a few words as we get started. First, I want to thank you all for participating. So it's a big chunk of time, not just today, but through over the process. And I wanted to give you just a few things to think about as we go through this process. So first, I want to emphasize the importance of our community being intentional. So we're subject to a lot of outside forces, economic forces, social forces, climatic forces. And I think for a long time, we kind of had the luxury of growing into ourselves without having to necessarily be intentional. But I think these pressures are so, they're a little bit like a diamond, right? So they're pushing on us. And if we're not intentional about what our future looks like, it's probably not going to be the future that we want. So really think a lot about that intentionality. The second thing is I really want to focus people's attention on the community compass. So we went through an extensive process working with the community to identify what our values are, and I hope we came out with something that really helps us understand in general where we want to go. So authentic, accountable, bold, connected. I think the more we're able to embed our thoughts in that framework, I think the more traction we're going to get. So as we think about articulating where we want to go, linking it to that framework, I think will be super helpful. The third thing I want to emphasize is the magic is going to be partly in the trade-offs. So the easy things are easy. So the easy things, we identify low-hanging fruit, we'll be able to grab that and pluck it. But the magic is going to be, we want everything. We want convenience, but we don't want a lot of people. We want a lot of people because we like the economic activity and the money that it generates, but we don't want to have a lot of people around. So we're going to have to figure out like what the trade-offs are, and our ability to engage meaningfully with those trade-offs and be driven by values is really going to determine a lot of the success. And so really think about like, what are those trade-offs, because how we decide will define us as a community. And then the last thing I want to emphasize is that the final component of the magic is that it's community driven. And so really having a multiplicity of voices, and the reason that we have you all here is because no one of us has the ability to understand how we should go on those trade-offs. And so we will be stronger in terms of being intentional, of understanding what those trade-offs are, by understanding a whole bunch of different voices. And it's impossible in a community of 1,800, as much as we would like to get everybody in a room and just spend a couple years hashing out those things, but you all represent that community. And so we have 7 council members that are very diverse, but this group is even more diverse, and you bring that diversity to the table. So as we go through the process, it's important that you articulate those opinions, that we really understand the wide range of perspectives as we talk about trade-offs. And if we do a good job going through this process and bringing those voices and that diversity to the table, really identifying those key trade-offs and having meaningful discussions, we'll create an intentional community that we can all be proud of 10 years from now and said, yes, this community is magic because of what we did and how we invested time here. So thank you all for participating. We'll really make a difference if we do this right. There's no guarantee we'll do it right, but having you in the room is a big step forward. So I'll turn it back to Miles and the team.
Thank you. Excellent. Well, thank you all for being here. And before we get into introductions, we're just going to do a little housekeeping and really level set on the purpose for why we're all here today. And a lot of this was in your packet, so we'll move through it quickly, and feel free to stop us, ask questions at any time. We want this to be casual and formal and a good dialogue with all of you. So thanks for making the time today. Meeting purpose, we really want to level set on the compass goals and values, as Ian said, and make sure that we're grounding ourselves in those values as we think about how we model our decision making. And we want to make sure that there's clarity on the Compass Navigation Committee roles and responsibilities. This navigation committee, as it's called, as many of you know, it's the overarching oversight committee for the 4 different plans that are moving forward today. So we're going to look at all those plans so we all have a working understanding of what those 4 different plans are that are an outgrowth of Compass and where they are in their planning process, so that this committee can help to reconcile them. So the role of this committee we'll get into today. And then the third piece here is a common understanding on the overarching process and those 4 plans. So our agenda follows this. And I know there's some glare on there, so hopefully we can all see it, but introductions and visioning exercise. This is where we want to understand your vision for the future of Crested Butte and the more of less of. So as we get into our introductions, we'll get into the more of less of it. Use this list, and I'm seeing a lot of themes on this list already, as really our guardrails and our guiding principles for the effort moving forward. And then we're gonna get into the committee role again, your charter responsibilities, and then our breakout exercise. We're gonna dig into some of the tools that are available to us so that we know what levers, what dials do we have to pull and to twist as we're thinking about how do we deliver the more of and the less of that we want to see in our community. And we're going to focus on historic preservation during breakout because that plan is a little bit farther in its evolution than some of the others. And so it provides a good model for us that we're going to dig into. And then we want to make sure that we're all going to be on the same page in terms of next steps and where we go from here. And these are all going to be public meetings. We've got our full BOZAR, our full council here. So these meetings are being recorded. They're all open to the public and there will be public comment. And then we want to make sure before we adjourn at noon that you all have a chance to ask any final clarifying questions. And so one more housekeeping reminder, there's a W-9 that you all need to fill out and return to Mel. I know the 6-inch rule is in effect today. I'm sure it's great out on the mountain. So I'm glad you're all being compensated through that W-9. Fill it out, get it to Mel, and we'll make sure that we get you out of here by noon so you can get a couple laps in if you can. Okay, and with this, I'm going to turn it over to Troy to level set us in the compass and how we got here.
I'm gonna introduce.
Oh, sorry, Troy. Cool. Here we go. So introductions. What we want to do is introduce ourselves, name, organizational affiliation, if any, and then your more of, less of list. Really quick, what 3 did you have for more? What 3 did you have for less? And in one sentence, why? So we're gonna start with staff as just quick introductions and then go to you all. So let's start with staff and we'll go Mel first and we'll work this way.
Hi, everyone. I'm Mel Youngma, long range planner with the town.
Thanks, Mel. I'm Miles Graham, principal at GBS. I'm out of Ridgeway and fortunate enough to help the town out on some of these meetings. Anna.
Morning, my name is Dana Lehman. I'm the sustainability coordinator.
Right.
I'm Troy Russ, community development.
Darren McDonald, town manager.
That's
I'm Hannah Cazella, I'm the new town planner.
I'm Jeffy Early, I'm current planning manager.
I'm Madison Manning, I'm the finance commissioner.
I don't think I missed any staff. So now the fun part, I can't believe I almost forgot it. We really want to hear on the more of, less of. So quick reminder, you're more of, less of, and in one sentence, why? And Chris, can start with you.
I'm Chris Hensley. I'm affiliated with the Adaptive Sports Center, and I can't see my notes over there. I think I said, more long-term peeps in town, more community. More accessibility within town, all the town's, planning processes. I think I said less speed, less cars, less, tidy Disneyland like. I just remember when this place used to be pretty rough, so. One sentence, because.
I like it, one word, points for brevity.
Jim Starr with the Cold Creek Watershed Coalition. I was until recently on the Valley Housing Fund. I said more occupied housing. Like to see more folks living here, especially the workforce folks. I said less cars, fewer cars, for the obvious reasons. And because I think our biggest challenge at this point is keeping our community. I think these two things would go quite a ways towards helping in that effort.
Thank you so much. Sorry, I forgot one last, less complaining.
That's a good one. I like that. I knew we started with Chris for a reason. Thanks so much, Chris. Eric.
Hi there, I'm Eric Norman. I'm the chair of Bozar. For more, I had counties, free time, and real citizens. Less, I had fancy cars, rich people, and people who treat our town as a business. And yeah, because that's what we need for quality of life, I think, here.
Thank you. Ed.
I'm Ed Schmidt. I'm fortunate enough to be on Bozar. I'm very impressed that you think I would remember what I wrote 2 minutes ago. So I'm guessing that I wrote more of equitable friendliness, accessibility on transportation, green space, sort of more of an overt attempt to be accessible and open to all of our community, and less of not friendly, equitable, accessible.
Andrew Hadley, I'm a local father, DJ, and architect.
In that order.
What I'd see more of is more funk, more what makes Crested Butte different than other places. Like to see more bikes, like to see all bikes and cars, but and more fish fries. Less of, I'd like to see less, maybe less fur. Maybe, what else? Less rules. I'd like to see less rules. Let people do what they like to do and see what happens. I don't know how that works out, but.
And we thank you, Anna.
I'm Anna Fennerty. I'm on town council. I said more slow streets, more bikes and last mile solutions, more community gardens and compost, more slowing down. I said less cars, less people driving short distances, and less money and water spent on non-native perennials. Very specific. I think, when I really feel at home in Crested, those are all the things that make me feel that way.
Thank you, Anna.
My name is Jessica Wellborn. I work for Crested Bank, into mortgage lending. I'm on the planning committee. My 3 things I'd like to see more of: bike rental program to encourage that, long-term rentals in the affordable housing program, and more community events. Kind of piggyback on Andrew, and I want to have more fun here. Stuff specifically geared towards locals and local attendance rather than $150 tickets to go see something. Let's see. less of speeding on 8th Street. Empty buildings on Elk and, you know, personal pet peeve, dog poop.
Nice.
I'm Flo Cunningham, I work at the museum, but I'm just representing me and not the museum. I'm on the transportation, committee and, I got here late, because I'm a slow walker. And I don't even realize how slow I am, but at least I walked. And so I didn't really do the more and less as much, except I put less unnecessary meetings. I don't mind meetings, but the unnecessary ones drive me crazy. And, more fun. I just dropped the K out of the funk there, Andrew, and I just put more fun. I would like to, I'm on board with Jim Starr of workforce housing in town. And, you know, and I do think making major steps for helping with, climate change. And major steps in doing the best we can to stop climate change in our community.
Awesome. Thank you, Glenn. We'll check in after the meeting, make sure this is necessary.
Yeah, I'll tell you.
Please do. Please do.
My name is Kent Calherd. I'm currently serving on town council. I'm a retired local firefighter and previously on the board of directors for the fire department. I'm also a local architect. I wrote down more bikes, pedestrians, dogs, street gatherings, attainable local housing, and less traffic, less regulation. I think this is all important to strengthen our sense of community.
Hi, my name is Giza Michael. I am on the Climate Action Committee and for work, I work with the Gunnison Valley Regional Housing Authority on the energy efficiency, doing the energy efficiency program. And I said, like for more of, I'm a very practical person. So I said a roundabout entering town. I said Elk Avenue being all pedestrian. And then I would love it if every existing housing stock receives energy efficiency upgrade and electrification, like how to get there. And then less of, I would love less expensive lunches. Yeah. I think it's over the years gone up so much. And then like to see less traffic during the high seasons.
Thank you so much, Molly.
My name is Molly Miniman. I used to work here. I've been officially retired, although redirected for the last 3 years. And so I'm grateful to be here. Appreciate that. I'm on the Historic Preservation Committee, so that preempts that one of my mora is historic building markers that expand into encompassing all of the walking tour. And consider doing that so that we can foster and energize our historic district. Another more of is continued parklets with two-way traffic on Elk Avenue because it minimizes the congestion on sidewalks. We used to have where we didn't have the parklets and there were sidewalk seating and people had to move in and out, and it was impossible for somebody that is compromised in any kind of way. They broke their leg, they have the child with the kids in the car seats, or they are non-ambulatory. So that's more of, and my other one is informative pedestrian signage. So that would be promoting good behavior for those of us that walk on the side streets or on Bellevue, and something that can be fun and just remind people, this is how you, car drivers, this is how you do it. For my less thans, my off-street signs that block the sidewalks on the weekends and the holidays. This is businesses because people who are, just as I mentioned, able to get around. And so that happens on the weekends. And I noticed that some people that have developed difficulty in walking, really, it's harder for them to get around. My other one, is, less VRBOs. Because they negatively impact neighborhoods. Parking, especially in certain areas, take up parking for locals, and they have a very difficult time, especially in the core, trying to find a place to park their work truck or just their car. And it creates greater neighborhood continuity with people who live there.
Thank you so much.
Monica Magner, Town Council. So with about half the room having spoken, I feel like the things I'd like to see and the things I wouldn't like to see has been greatly expanded because you guys have said stuff that I realize likewise. But I did put that I wanted to see more dark sky, more neighbors with community ties, and more locals who provide our services. I wanted to see fewer cars, less traffic, less congestion, and fewer lights on all night. And the reason why I realized that I'm kind of focusing on the dark sky thing is that I think that that is sort of emblematic of our town values. We all love nature, we want to see the stars, and for people who don't feel the same and who feel it necessary to keep lights on throughout the night, I feel like that's not in furtherance with our community values. Thank you.
Hi, Andres Sobbs, member at large, husband, father, let's go Titans, skier, business owner. Like to see more safe teen social spaces. Like to see more energy efficiency. And more. Forgot what my third one was. Less, more affordable housing. Less, i.e. no STRs, less cars, and less, what's the third one? Can't remember what it was.
We'll come back, we'll have a chance.
Yeah.
And I know on the cars, where you ended.
Oh,
That
less empty houses.
Nice. And those are two big things that we're seeing on this one already. Thanks, Andres.
So Ian Billick, Mayor, and I also work with the Rocky Mountain Biological Laboratory. And I think the three things that I'd like to see more of would be community, sort of town character, sort of a community that, you know, it surprises me, engages me, sort of pushes me to new places. And then also maybe more empowered leaders. So, you know, this is a great group of people, and I think the more individuals that we have that can sort of be leaders and build alignment to drive our community where it needs to go, I think the stronger we'll be. And then less of echoing what many people have said, so fewer cars, like to see less carbon in all the wrong places, and maybe less snarkiness.
That's what.
Snarkiness.
Thanks, Ian.
Hi, I'm Nicole Glazer, and I'm currently in law school for environmental law and policy. I'm currently looking for an internship. Everybody knows of one of them. And I'm also affiliated with the Gunnison Valley Climate Crisis Coalition. I volunteer there for over 2 years now. I would like to see more bikes, more local food production to whatever degree that's possible, and waste management such as composting. And maybe along the lines of Ian, I'd also like to see more, I can't think of a great way to term this, but more community education or community awareness and understanding. Because I believe a community that is jazzed and excited about the things that are happening, it's gonna happen, and it brings more fun and fun into all these things that we're facing and have to do, and I think that leads to great success. I would like to see less cars. I would like to definitely see less fires, drought, smoke, increasing heat, because our future world and the fate of humanity depends on it. I believe that Crested Butte is in a position to be, a role model because of the popularity and the position, and the awesomeness of Crested Butte. We can be role models for many other communities. And so we are empowered and, I think we can make great change.
Thank you.
I'm Valita Scribner. My day job is I'm a corporate sustainability consultant with an organization called NG Impact. I'm on the boards of Habitat for Humanity and Venison Valley Climate Crisis Coalition, KUTPJ, MEM alumni, and yeah, so so definitely more accessible housing, quality restaurants that we can afford. And one that really hits for me is job diversity, because I see so many other mountain town communities that are so focused on just tourism that they lose their soul in that service mindset. And I think with a more diverse workforce, we have the ability to be more resilient with those tourism ups and downs, and likely not just rely on that, especially with this long-term plan. So that's a thought that I have there. I also think that really brings a little bit more diverse community into our midst. And yeah, less fires and avalanches for, and I also put cars, we all, again, with the things that we love about this community being our access to the outdoors and our love of our surroundings, that we want to protect that to the best of our ability with the actions that we take today. There we go.
Beth Goldstone, town council member. I also work full-time for the school district. I'd like to see more year-round bike commuting. I think it's in line with a lot of what people said, year-round bike commuting, more affordable events and restaurants and things like that, in places where the community gathers that are affordable. And more kind of that demographic that I think we're starting to lose, that the ski bum demographic, the service industry, the kind of the young right out of college demographic that I think town is losing. Things I'd like to see less of, cars, lights at night, and then I agree with complaining.
Thank you.
Hey, I'm Donnie Duvall. I'm on the zoning board. I work for a local solar contractor. I'm also a Western MEM student. I'm finishing up in a month. So some more things that I had, more bikes for tourists, some more public transportation options for more parts of the outskirts of town or the valley, more public involvement. And I kind of threw in there at the end resiliency for a sentence, but less lights at night. Also had complaining without solutions, less bitching. And then less food waste, whether it's food itself or packaging and all that stuff, take out things. I think resiliency is really important because there's a lot of things that we're just not going to be able to plan for that are unexpected and are going to come up. And the more we can know we can be resilient, the less we'll be able to take those hits when they come.
Thank you.
I'm Danica. I was born and raised here, and I own Townie Books and Rumors with Barvin, and we have twin girls. I put more community gatherings. I feel like Vinnetalk and mostly Vinnetalk are like one of the only things that I remember from my childhood that is kind of still here, and I think they've done a really good job of it. Like the tourists started to try to come in, college kids started to try to come in, and yes, like the tourists do come to it, but I think there's a lot of elements of Vinnetalk that are still like alive and well. And I feel like we should try to do more of that, because every time I'm at a community gathering, I just feel like the community is reinvigorated and recommitted to each other and our community. So, and then less vacation rentals, or at least limiting them in some way. I actually live in City South, and we don't have any limits because we had this stupid voting debacle. But the house right next door was owned by these people who had a little kid, our kid's age, and it was so great. And then they sold their house to somebody who's vacation renting it, and it's changed the feel just of our street so much, because people are in and out. Like, I'm like, they're in there for one night. I'm just like, what are these people doing, like renting this house for one night? And we've had to tell our girls, like, don't go over there because we don't know who that is. And so I just think it really fractures a community to have like all these vacation rentals just like in between everybody living. And it limits the housing for the workforce. And as a business owner, we can't find people that can actually live in town. We've been hiring people that are commuting from Gunnison, and that causes all sorts of other problems. So, yeah, and I agree with a lot, like most people's less is and more, so I'd love to hear all those.
Hello, I'm Roxana, Alvarez Martin, and I've been on the Bozer board for what feels like my entire adult life. And I mean, I think I just, pretty much everything that's been said out loud is something I was trying to grasp at how to write in a little short sticky note, so I would agree with everything that's been said. I would just emphasize that the 2 points that I wrote were much more connectivity through public transportation. I mean, everything we said out loud is things that I agree with, but the devil's in the details. There are some things that if we were to start to put things down on paper are gonna contradict each other. So there's a contradiction for me between the organic feel of this town and all of the regulation that we would have to put in place to actually make these things happen that we're saying out loud. And so, so I'm kind of in the same space as Ken and Andrew, that regulation to me makes a place feel unreal. It makes it feel like Disneyland. And so organic, like how do we put all of these things in place in a way that feels organic and real and like in a place that I live in, but it's not, you know, overly managed. So that's a big concern for me. The connectivity through public transportation, and then the connectivity of how do we bring people that are not in this room? This room is very heavily representing like the regulatory organizations and a few non-for-profits in town, but there's very little Elk Avenue business owners, maybe except for you and me, in this space right now. And it creates a feeling of otherness for those people who do not participate in the rulemaking. This is the case also for second homeowners. How do we create more opportunities for them to contribute so that they feel invested rather than a place that they come in, use, and leave? And so those are not things that I wrote down successfully on a piece of paper, but thanks for the opportunity to say it out loud.
Absolutely. Those are great things, and I think that's a great note to end on today for the introductions is we are going to be looking at how do we bring in the community, and each of you is sitting in the seat today because you represent broader constituents in the community, and this is just the start of this process, and we're going to be seeking your input, your guidance, and your partnership to make sure that we do reach all corners of the community. So that's critically important, and this list is amazing. There's a lot of commonalities, a lot of themes already emerging. So we'll be looking at this list, and then today, the tools that we have, because Roxana, you're right, the devil is in the details. So to start to look at some of the tools we have in our toolbox and how we use them to deliver the things we want to see more of and less of the things we want to see less of. So that's really what today is all about.
So could we just, either Madison or Jesse, reiterate what I think everyone's heard? What were the top? There seems to be great alignment. There's more in common than not.
Less by a distance here, I think everyone's pretty on the same page about less traffic, less speed, less cars. Which is one here. followed closely by empty houses, dark neighborhoods, STRs. And I put this next to that Disneyland type of feel that more than one person mentioned and wrote down, complaining. And then over here, we have a number of different, environmental concerns.
Thank you.
For more, a lot of things relating to community, some not exactly the same, but citizens, people living here, vibrant community. Biking, pedestrians is this one, public transportation, accessibility, affordable housing are kind of the big ones in the middle. And then as you move out, affordable restaurants, great restaurants, which I heard from some of you. Some of the, public involvement, public education, energy efficiency, and then some of the ones just kind of not as many on the outskirts were job diversity, free time, safe teen spaces, dark sky, gardens or green on elk, and then fun and focus.
Thanks, Jesse, Mary, that's a great summary. And one other thing I heard on the more up too is some resiliency and adaptation to change. So we know that we can manage what's coming. And with that, Chloe's gonna walk us through the overview on this.
So, we've been doing this a lot, and I think as the mayor said, to get there, to start taking action, are we planning to plan? No, we're planning to take action. But we have to agree to values before you make a decision, because nowhere in Compass does it say what we're gonna do. It says, these are the things we need to address. And how we're gonna address them is through these values. So the community compass, thank you for participating in that. Now we're getting real. And you saw in the newspapers, we're getting real really fast. Because it gives council direction and gives staff sort of permissions from council to actually take action. And that was the entire purpose of Compass. So just going through it, as the mayor said, right, it's a declaration of who we are and what we value. There's a strategic plan that I'm going to go through. And I think the most important is a decision-making framework. It's an agreement between the town and our community. As decisions get harder, we're going to dig deeper into the community and really rely on the community to work with us to make those decisions. And we promised to do that. And that's what the decision-making framework is very clear on. And then it actually started regional collaboration, right? Working with the county, working with the mountain, working with their transit providers to really make a difference. So it's very important to go there. So in Compass, there were 7 strategic goals and they're gonna conflict. We know that. And that's why you're all here, as the mayor said. We're gonna have preservation going head on to affordability, right? How do we as a community make those decisions, right? So there's specific goals that all of you are here hoping to accomplish, but they're gonna run into each other. So while we may be a climate action advocate, right, you have to give it perspective. What's climate action for Crested Butte? What's preservation for Crested Butte? What's affordable housing for Crested Butte? You're our voices to balance that out, to do these trade-off conversations. And it's really important to execute that because a community, it's not a simple, hey, if we just, provided parking, we'd solve everything. It's, you all know it's much more complicated than that. And so where we need to go is really tough decisions, right? Changing the zoning code holistically, we've incrementally changed it since the 70s. And it's a reflection of who we are, but it becomes reactionary and not proactive. And so we need to change the zoning ordinance to make sure 30 years ago when we first wrote it and every incremental change that has been put into its sense, is it really aligned to where we need to go? So we intend to change the zoning to make sure it's our most powerful tool is working with us. We need to come up with a housing strategy. We're at the end of a 5-year strategy. What is our approach to housing? How much do we fund? How much do we incentivize? How much can we get the market to actually help us? Our ADUs aren't coming in as what we once did when we used to subsidize 2/3 of it. What do we need to do to play with either incentives or actually the market and zoning to make it contribute to it? How do we create that resilient community, not just environmentally, but so we can afford to live here? So we can get the goods and services so we can be residents that feel our house's plumbing can actually be repaired. Or we can get our houses painted in a way, in a convenient way. So that's what the resilient community plan. And to get there, we need to have agreement on the values. And so the compass is done, is that the mayor said, we've got to buy into that, right? As long as we agree to the values and the framework for discussions, we can then go into what we're doing. Right, so we have the transportation master plan, the preservation plan, the climate action plan, all informing the community plan, which will then inform the zoning changes, right? Or whatever specific strategies, and together, all of them are gonna make a difference, right? So how do they work together, right? And because we know there's overlap. And so we're going to methodically go through this to make sure preservation does preserve the character of this town while making sure it achieves the goals and ambitions of the community similarly. But there's timing to it. And everyone says, well, the transportation plan is done. Yes, it has been adopted by council, but how you implement it and how fast you implement it can be changed literally every single year. And the budget. And if there's things that we missed, we're always ears, we can always modify. But that's really much more, since it's been adopted, how do we deal with the gas pedal? And do we accelerate initiatives? Do we slow them down? The community action plan is just getting started, or the community plan. The climate action plan is just a little bit ahead of it. It's defining a challenge statement. And we're gonna really focus today on the preservation plan, as they're starting to identify what are actual alternatives, what can be considered. So this whole committee is gonna be a part of that conversation. So how do we together, as a valley, really make sure we're meeting these goals, right? And just to reiterate, the mayor's done it, we're doing it, there's trade-offs inherent in it, right? To achieve a goal of reducing the number of cars in town, maybe parking is gonna be less convenient, right? Maybe that's an actual outcome of this, right? And going through and recognizes with each one of these things, we have to be accountable to our visions. And these trade-offs are tough. And as the mayor said, no one of us should be able to make that decision, right? Council has 7, but they need to be informed by all of you. And so that's why we've structured the plan the way we have. And we're very intentional in getting the plans done because it's getting real and it's getting real fast, right? We're designing a roundabout with the school district this year. And so there's no more talking. And so we want to make sure we're doing this thing right. So with that, I just want to give this back to Mel to give an overview of the transportation plan, if you have any questions, but then dig into the preservation.
Thanks, Troy. So next up, we're gonna be going into an overview of each of the plans Troy just mentioned. So I'm gonna start off with transportation. The transportation plan was really trying to address our challenges of, we're really known for being pedestrian and bike friendly, but number one, we want to do more. We really want to seize on that kind of bike pedestrian friendly culture. And number two, we recognize kind of growth in traffic, more people living out of town has started, and cars driving through town has really started to erode that experience as well. So what can we do to work on that challenge? And I'm really relieved to see so much alignment on wanting to see more bikes and pedestrian friendliness and transit access and less cars, because that's exactly what the goal of the transportation mobility plan was, which came right from the compass. And that was to de-emphasize cars and focus on walking, biking, rolling, and transit. Throughout that plan, through its process, we came up with 6 success measures with our transportation plan committee that you will all be working on success measures for your individual plans. And that's really saying, here's our goal, but how do we do that in a successful way for the Crested Butte community? How do we do that aligned with our values? So we came up with increasing mobility choices. How do we provide more choices and increasing people's experiences? At the same time, reducing vehicle traffic in town, ensuring traffic goes slowly, strengthening our sense of community and our connections to each other, keeping our rough edges and polishing only when necessary, and testing and tailoring solutions when and where we can to ensure we achieve the result we want. So yes, while this plan was adopted, there's going to be a lot of testing and tailoring in the years to come and a lot more opportunities for input to shape how this is implemented. So the transportation plan started over a year ago now, and we had a little over a year-long process in 3 phases. We first did a lot of data analysis and collection to understand our existing mobility conditions. So I really encourage you, if you haven't read the transportation plan, please check it out because we have some fantastic data and community feedback in there. After that, we worked with the community to identify what our biggest challenges and opportunities. So whether many of you were in this room last May for either our May the 4th Be With You open house or our different focus area workshops, or maybe you saw a survey in a bathroom stall. We really did a lot of outreach throughout the spring and summer to get feedback. And that's what led us to starting to define those success measures. And then lastly, drafting the plan. We brought together an advisory committee, and thank you to those members who are continuing on in this committee today for all of the meetings, all of the hard work and hard conversations that went into that. And that's where we really identified, filtered, and vetted so many different alternatives and ideas. And we rewrote the transportation plan a number of times. We did the same thing with the compass. We really pride ourselves on really trusting these processes and working with the community to make sure we can come up with a plan and an outcome that's really supported with the community using that informed consent decision-making model. And after many drafts, many conversations, many work sessions, meetings, the town council adopted the plan earlier this month. And the outcome of that plan was we came up with an overall guiding strategy for a 20-year action plan. And that strategy focuses on improving transportation choices, managing parking convenience, recognizing those things really go hand in hand together. And lastly, integrating land use and transportation. So that's a big clue to our community plan, is that how can we get more cars in town or less traffic in town, more people living closer to where they work. So that's already an intersection we're seeing between these plans. And that action plan, I know it's very long. That's what makes the transportation plan so much longer than the compass, but we have intentionally phased solutions filtered through those success measures I talked about before in 6 main categories. And yes, we just adopted the plan, but it did not go on the shelf. We're actively implementing it and hitting the ground running this year. So this is going to mean you're going to see some physical things like on Elk Avenue, the paint on the corners, bike racks on the corners, improving sight lines, some new stop signs, converting parking on 5th Street to parallel to improve safety. But also bigger picture things like participating in Mountain Expresses and RTA's transit plans to really see how can we work with our partners to really recognize all the great growth transit has done, but how can we do more? It seems we have so much even buy-in in this room of we want more accessible, connected transit. We're also going to be designing a roundabout at the entrance to town and doing many other things this year. Oh yeah, and if you haven't read this Crested news the last 2 weeks, there are going to be some incremental changes with parking too. So we're really doing a lot. And as Troy mentioned, this is never going to end. There's going to be lots of opportunity for input, lots of opportunity to test and tailor and keeping to shape the plan. But this is a great example of how well it feels like with Compass Navigation, we're doing so much heavy planning. These plans are leading to real changes and impacts on the community. So we want you to remember, we are going to go from planning to implementation, and with transportation, we're doing that quickly. So next up, I'm going to turn it over to Jesse to talk about the historic preservation plan.
Okay, thank you guys again for being here today. I'm going to start off with the challenge. What's the challenge of the historic preservation plans trying to solve? So one of the things that we heard from the Compass is we've fought hard to protect our historic buildings, but new buildings are starting to look the same. So some of those pictures on the top represent that. But yet the photos on the bottom are important to remember that our buildings help to connect us and help to facilitate, foster those community connections that we value, that we've heard so much in we want more of those things. So we want to keep that within the plan. So the goal of the historic preservation plan is to ensure the town's architectural identity is a reflection of Crested Butte's deep sense of community and its evolution over time, tracking back to those pictures and what our goal is for the plan. The historic preservation plan, this is the process. We're currently in phase 3, but just to back up to give you a little information about where we've been. We did a lot of data collection on buildings from 1952 to 1992, just to understand what buildings do we have that are outside of our period of significance. Our period of significance is 1880 to 1952, which represents coal mining in Crested Butte, as many of you probably already know, but just to give you a little background. So just understanding what we have, so then the plan can better speak to what's our moving forward, are we protecting those buildings? Or are we wanting to see more diversity based upon those styles? And so that's kind of helping to inform us. So our consultant's working on the data analysis right now. He should be finalizing that soon. And so we're in phase 3, as I said. We've worked hard to think about the challenge that we have and develop a goal. And we have success measures which I'll share with you in a moment. Along the way, we've had a lot of community feedback, which we'll share with you later. We have a couple opportunities coming up too. If you haven't had an opportunity, we'd love to see you at some of those events too. But then those will help us to define our alternatives, what the activity will be today, to help us develop a toolkit for the historic preservation plan. So our success measures for the historic preservation plan, we originally had 5, but as Mel said, things are kind of in flux as we go through the process, whether it be we meet with the committee or we're meeting with Beaux-Arts and town council or getting feedback from the community. So we're constantly trying to take information in and filter it through. Our success measures, as Mel already said, also are going to be what are the guardrails to help us as we move forward in writing the plans to filter everything through those things. So the first one is to develop strategies that help to support our National Historic designation and continue to preserve our historic structures. We felt like through the discussions we heard from everyone, we want to keep doing what we're doing with the buildings from our period of significance. So we felt like that's an important thing to state. The second one is respect the mass scale and orientation of Crested Butte, and to go into that a little further, it got a little too wordy for the slide, but specific to mass, ensuring that the mass of the buildings are relational to neighboring buildings. So what do buildings look like next to one another? As far as the scale goes, maintain the human scale of Crested Butte's architecture. So we like that there's a pedestrian feel to most buildings within town. So whatever we might be changing with zoning or the guidelines, one of the goals would be to make sure that it keeps that human scale. And then as far as orientation goes, it relates to the site plan and the layout of the building itself, both. But buildings face the street and are designed to foster a walkable and connected community. And also buildings and site layouts support the character and use of the town's alleys. We felt like it was both important to mention both the streets and the alleys. And then number 3 is to allow for a range of styles and materials that celebrate Crested Butte's historic vernacular, architecture, and demonstrate environmental stewardship. And the final one is that the historic preservation plan will clearly communicate Crested Butte's architectural story, its preservation strategy, and the community's design expectations. And with that, I will pass it along to you.
Jesse, what was the building in the last slide?
It's the powerhouse, so where Bones is now. Yeah. Yeah.
Morning again, everybody. Town of Crested Butte is writing a climate action plan to one, help drive down our fair share of greenhouse gas emissions, and 2, protect the natural resources that we all enjoy and love about living here, and help future generations enjoy those natural resources. So things like the alley loop, kayaking, mountain biking, skiing, and also just our community, our quality of life. So as it's been mentioned a few times, we're still in that beginning phase of the climate action plan, phase 1. We have presented to our committee a draft challenge and a goal statement for them to review and provide feedback on. So we're working on that, and I'm excited to hear what the committee thinks. We'll be talking about that on April 25th. And the climate action plan is meant to act on climate in a bold and accountable way. So I didn't put the draft challenge and goal statement here, just to give our committee fair time to really evaluate that before we pump it out to everybody for more comment. But our goal statement and challenge statement
is really meant to be resilient, to different priorities in the town, as well as, creating a goal that, allows us to be accountable. So really addressing those fair share of emissions, and also bold. And bold might mean we are really aggressive on our greenhouse gas emissions reduction strategies, but bold might also mean setting the example for other mountain communities of what's possible, which is what we've already been doing. So we want to continue that strategy. And then I just wanted to share a couple of upcoming engagement and also address kind of that phase 2 where we're starting to identify community engagement strategy for the plan. So first and foremost, April 25th is our next committee meeting where we'll be looking at our challenge and goal statement formally and revising that as staff once we hear feedback. And we will also be starting to address the success measures, which Jessie gave some really good examples for in her plan. And then we are looking at a climate week or some potential climate events over the summer. And those are still being formulated, so TBA on those. Mine's really fun.
And lastly, I'll give a quick overview on the community plan. This is formerly referred to as the strategic infill plan or the infill study, but we realized a lot of people were like, what does that mean? And STIP is also not a great acronym for that. So the community plan, Crested Butte, as many of you mentioned in your more or less of, we're really losing ground on community livability. And this makes up so many things. Affordable housing, losing our community members moving out of town, more dark neighborhoods, empty businesses on Elk or not affordable businesses or essential goods and services. But it's also that sense of community, that civic engagement. Someone can actually serve on Bozar. So Roxana can finally maybe take a break in the future. Or, you know, those community events or things like that, those bingo nights that really bind us all together. And this is a huge challenge addressing livability, but the community plan is really going to focus on comprehensively planning the future physical build out of Crested Butte. So this is going to be a very physical design oriented plan. Through this plan, we're going to study the market conditions of the town in the North Valley. We're going to evaluate our current development regulations, and then we're going to collaboratively develop alternative build out scenarios with the community. And there's a really important why behind this. This isn't just for let's fill in every corner of town where we can for more tourism growth or more people. There's a really intentional why about we want to increase community access to attainable and secure housing in town, increase opportunities for more affordable essential goods and services, and ensure a vibrant local business scene. And after the community plan, our recommendations will be codified in the town's municipal code. And while the town has really done a great job over the years of tactically building a lot of housing, 25% of our housing stock in town is currently affordable housing. It's hard and expensive and really challenging, and we still are losing ground on it. So this plan is really all about how can we get the private market to help us in this challenge and work together there. I wanted to note that this plan is funded by the Department of Local Affairs through their new Strong Communities Grant Program. And through receiving that grant, we have to evaluate and adopt at least one of the Strong Community strategies. So we're going to be looking at some ideas that a lot of different towns and municipalities around the state are looking at, from things like higher density multifamily housing, land banking, minimum parking requirements, which you also looked at in the transportation plan. And this grant was very focused on, yeah, we want you to look at these, but you're not going to get funding unless you commit to at least adopting one of those. So that's a really important charter for this group and that committee to really follow through and how we vet those in a way that's best for Crested Butte and aligned with our values. So our process for the community plan, we just kicked this off last week. We're in our discovery phase right now where we're doing a lot of data connection and analysis. We are working with a national architectural firm, Torby Gallis and Partners, and they came into town for a kickoff meeting last week. Also met with our community plan advisory committee. And we're going to get going on that market study. The Housing Authority at the same time is also working on updating their housing needs assessment. And as part of this, Hannah has been working really hard on updating our local census. So if you live in town and you have not filled out your census survey, please, please, please do so. It's very important to know. And that phase will wrap up with really better understanding and defining the challenge and coming up with that key goal statement. Next, phase 2 is going to be all about desire throughout the summer, and this is going to match with a lot of general compass navigation events and outreach activities this summer, but we're going to do a lot of outreach to really hear from the full community. What do you want to see for the future Let's start getting some feedback on what our goals are and things like that. And we'll do a lot of specific stakeholder interviews. And that'll wrap up with identifying those success measures. Phase 3 is all about the design. So we're gonna have a week-long community design charrette at the Center for the Arts the week of September 10th, where it's gonna be really interactive, open houses, meetings, focus groups, interviews, and Tori Gallus' team is gonna have a live design workshop studio that week, really drawing out different design alternatives for what the future physical build out of Crested Butte could look like in a way that's informed by those success measures and our goal that we've previously defined. And through there, we'll develop and refine and begin filtering those alternatives. And lastly, discussion. We'll do a lot more outreach, get feedback on those alternatives, draft and refine the plan, and work towards adopting the plan, which will lead right into an update of our municipal code. Right, back to my minutes.
All right, and before we jump into any questions about each individual plan, we know that you all sit on the advisory committees for those different plans. So we wanted to take just a couple minutes on what the charter for this group is, as we convene all of the 4 committees together as one overarching navigation committee. So on the next slide, you can see just a little bit about understanding your role. And as I said earlier, the meetings for this group are all going to be open, public, recorded. There will be public comment, and emails correspondence will also be subject to open records. So be mindful of any reply all situations and as we work through the planning process. So also something to keep in mind is, as we talked about, you are all here today because you represent broader constituencies. And so not only are you going to be helping advise the planning teams and ultimately BOZAR and council, but you're also going to be helping act as ambassadors for this process. And if you're hearing something in the community that needs to be addressed, we want you to be able to bring information to us so we can go out and have those conversations in the community. So it is intended to be very much a two-way flow of information. And the key findings from each individual plan and the work and the deep learning that you're all going to be engaged with as you work through the independent plans is going to come back to this committee, where we're reconciling, vetting those recommendations with our values. And as has been discussed, there are going to be inherent trade-offs that we're going to need to work through and find creative solutions for. And so that is really going to be the role of this group as we work through some of those trade-offs, reconcile them so that we are accountable to our values, and bringing recommendations on how we manage those trade-offs to the planning teams, to BOZAR and to council. So that's the charter for this group. And it's really all about shared leadership, which Dara is going to talk a little bit about.
So we're all here because change is happening in the community, right? And change is inevitable. We can control some and some happen to us, right? We can't control the all flying, but that's something that happens to us in our community. Has responded. But things like slowly tightening parking regulations, that's something our local government can control. It's change, but it's intentional change. And so what we want, again, the outcome of all of this is to drive that intentional change into the future. We did want to touch a little bit on the same thing we've had sort of all day, right? These trade-offs that we're going to be faced with as part of this process. And one example, I'm not a huge fan of vacation rentals. I actually think this town's done a really good job of very early on striking a balance on vacation rentals in the community that allows for some vacation rentals, but doesn't allow the community to be overrun. And we're fortunate that in 2016, our council took that on. Right, love them or hate them, we're about to ask the town council to issue about $10 million in debt, in part guaranteed by the revenues directly generated by vacation rentals to pay for affordable housing. Right, so that's a big example in my mind of finding a balance, maybe where no one's entirely happy, but we take that and we do something really productive with it. We'll see what the council decides. It's a big leap to take on that debt, so everybody, let's go. So I think, keeping that in mind, right? If you're super passionate about wanting to reduce greenhouse gases and make this community more resilient, that's going to bump up against historic preservation and the detailed ways in which we passionately preserve what's important about the built environment in this community, which is also gonna bump up against how do we create more housing units in town, right? And so I think this town has a great history of finding creative solutions, unique solutions that no one else has explored, and a willingness to do that. But where that's not possible, finding compromise. And again, with the compass, I think one of the most important things that came out of the compass was the idea of informed consent and not consensus. Consensus is not our goal as part of this process. Informed consent is as many people as we can have engaged and participating and informed, the better. So that everyone understands at least why the decisions are made that the council ultimately adopts and goes up enforces. So just keep that in mind. Where we find consensus, that's amazing. And yes, that's wonderful. And we'd love to get there on everything. We're not going to. And we're gonna have to accept that we don't win. But at the same time, each of you who are on these advisory committees are here because you're passionate about that particular topic. And so yes, be an advocate for that, but also listen really closely and deeply to your counterparts is what we want to see. So thank you again for being here, for your time, for your passion, for your commitment to the community. It's amazing and super inspiring. So thanks.
Sarah, thank you so much. And thank you to all the teams for presenting your overviews on the plan. So we're actually doing really good on time. We want to take just a few minutes for any clarifying questions you all have about any of the individual plans, where they are in their evolution, or just the charter and the shared leadership responsibility of this group. So Troy and Mel, before we kick into this, anything else to add from the staff perspective? Before we jump into questions? None? Excellent. More questions you all have? Yeah.
Yeah, so just to clarify, the intent of our planning, of each of our plans in this holistic plan is primarily focused on the town of CV, or can it go beyond the town boundaries into Mount CV, maybe reaching down into, CV South Gunnison? What are the boundaries of the plans?
That's a great question, and I'll let Troy and Mel get into the details. I would just say from a big picture perspective, what we know is it's a small valley. The decisions we make in the upper valley, in the jurisdiction of the town of Crested Butte, are gonna have ripple effects into our neighboring communities. So the intent of Compass, of navigation, and of the individual plans is to really focus on the tools we can control, but also be seeding those regional conversations and partnerships as well, and trying to bring in that collaborative process so that we're not doing things in a vacuum, and we're doing things collaboratively to be a leader, to be a role model, and to bring in our partners as we go. And Troy and Mel, you're a lot closer to this, so I'll let you go deeper if you like.
I think you explained it perfectly. Just an example is there's a lot of transit ambitions in the mobility study. We're not the implementers of transit. We certainly help fund Mountain Express, but those agencies have a broader constituency. And so what we did in the mobility study was say, hey, we really need you to look at these things. These are important to the town of Crested Butte, and working closely with their board and their staff, making sure they at least evaluate it in their strategic plan and sort of press, saying this is important to us, but it is certainly their decision and their resources that we're asking about. So I think just remembering, yes, I think we understand from a climate perspective, a transportation perspective, there's many things the town does not control, but we certainly want to work with our partners to achieve them. And just being a good neighbor, like I think what Dara just said, really listening, pressing our values, but hearing and sort of working out a solution together with our partners.
And I would just add one thing, while these plans will be kind of focused on what are the tools like in the town we can control, but where are partnerships regionally we need to leverage. On the flip side, when it comes to community engagement, we're a small town with a big community. So it's not like you have to live in the town to participate in these plans. We really want to hear feedback from everyone. And we did that in the Compass, we did that in transportation. And I think the Compass, we had more passion and interest about sense of community in Crested Butte from residents of CV South, for example. So we really want to make sure we're really casting a broad net because we all deeply love this place.
I'm gonna add one thing, and I know we've with 8,000 plans up on the screen for you today, but following this process, there will be an Upper Valley planning effort kicking off potentially later this year. That's our goal, probably next year. That will be the corridor plan, and it'll be land use and transportation from CV South to Mount Crested Butte. And so what we come out of with our community plan will drive our involvement in that corridor plan.
Thanks, Sarah, and it's a great question, and I think we'll be relying on you all as partners to help feed in opportunities. Where can we go beyond and engage, because we are a small town with big community.
The greenhouse gas emissions inventory, is that, a baseline? Is that gonna establish a baseline, or is it more of monitoring against previous baselines that?
So our baseline right now is 2017, and we're doing a 2022 greenhouse gas emissions inventory. Thank you for bringing that up, because I realized, I forgot to mention it. We haven't finalized that inventory just yet. It should be done firmly by like mid-April ahead of the meeting. But sorry, to get back to your original question, 2017 is gonna be our baseline. There is a little bit of discussion on the different methodologies between years, and so that baseline could move, but right now it's 2017. Does that answer?
It could move
We
later
might
in
say
2017.
Could be our baseline and set goals to 2030 for that, but we'll discuss that with the committee. Great question, thank you.
What's the best way for the community to access these documents and learn about the process and when certain meetings might be happening?
That's a great question. And right now, we're sort of in the soft launch phase where we're building those fundamentals, the architecture for all that community engagement. The thought is the Get Involved page on the town website currently is already underway to evolve into kind of that compass navigation landing page, where you can see a running calendar of meetings, links to all of the different plans. It's designed to be that clearinghouse, the one-stop shop for this information. And then all of our packets, all of the presentations, all of these meeting materials will be hosted there as well. So that'll be the hosting place. But we know from community conversations, it's great to have that headquarters for that information, but it's going to take an all of the above approach where we can push the stuff out via social media, have a Compass newsletter, be working with the local newspaper and our partners to help get the word out there too. But it will all come back to that central navigation website on the town's website. And
But that's not quite ready yet.
it's,
Well, I'll speak more to that. Currently, we do have information housed on that Get Involved page. We also have dedicated links to each of the individual plans that go more in depth. Today, there is a MailChimp sign out on that page that I would encourage all of you and tell your friends to sign up for, because I send out monthly civic engagement opportunities that are linked to each of these plans. And as we move forward, that page, that Get Involved page, will be beefed up with more information moving forward.
I don't know, it feels like staff is dogpiling to answer every question, but this is the single hardest thing in community planning. Right? For 35 years, I always have heard, how can you get more information out? We need your help. If you have any ideas to improve connections, conversations to the community, we're improving day by day. It literally takes a village to make sure people are aware. We're battling with work schedules. We're battling with apathy. We're battling, oh, it's not my concern because it doesn't influence me. This is the hardest part of community planning and just, I'll be honest, governance. So wherever we can ask, you have an idea, tell us, hey, this is an idea, we will test it. Help us get the word out.
thank you. Well,
I have an idea.
Good.
I think that because of my demographic of being in my 70s and most of my friends who have lived here for 30 and 40 years, the paper is the way to go and not the internet as often. So possibly you can get the paper to do an article quoting some of you guys that are here at staff, giving the links in the paper, just writing it down very succinctly. I would respond to that much more. I don't ever go on the town.
That's great.
Yeah, I feel like with
Website.
with the parking, it's like people didn't wake up until it was in the paper. And then I'm sure you guys I commented. I'm sure you guys got a lot of commenting from the paper and people should have been involved that whole year of the transportation plan, including myself. And I think like what Glow's saying is the paper really does like wake people up. They're like, oh, something's happening.
We have a great partnership with CV News and during both Compass and the transportation plan, and we're trying to work with Mark on the other one. We had front page banner questions and comments, so the
Right.
paper is critical and we can always do better.
And one of the first things we have planned as we get ready for ramping up our outreach this summer is a newspaper insert to make sure that we're not only working with the paper on articles and editorials, but some of the newspaper placements that just sum everything up in a really glanceable way. And we're actually working on a graphic right now that if you're just walking by, you can see Compass navigation. There's 4 plans, a really quick high-level summary of it, so we can put it in the paper. We can put it in all the different places, because it's not just one magic unicorn that if we put it here, it's gonna be adopted and understood by everybody. It needs to be in all those places. So Glo, you're making a great point, and Molly and then Nicole.
I was just gonna add, when the town council meetings occur, if they're always, if they were always in the paper, and sometimes they are, sometimes they're not, just, I think that's also, an opportunity for people to take a look at those in the paper, because so many people, you read the paper, you read something on the internet, and then you kind of forget the details. Always go back to the paper and save it for the next few weeks. Those are.
Great. Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Nicole.
I really like this process a lot. I think it's excellent. I think it's really well intended. I love the idea that was spoken about how we're all ambassadors here. And I'm wondering if there's some way to provide information on like best practices for ambassadors. Like how can we best be ambassadors and get the positive vibes out, be realistic about the challenges, but celebrate successes. Because I think that's pretty powerful. And, we all come from all different pockets of the community, and we can really accomplish that, but what are the best ways to do that?
It's great. And a toolkit for ambassadors is something that we'd love to put together. And it's another one of those challenges that what works for Nicole may be different than what works for Molly and works for Glo. So a lot of that also comes back to let us know what you need individually, and we'll customize and tailor your ambassador toolkit. We'll definitely have the fact sheet, the website, newspaper inserts, all of the baseline fundamentals, and we can then tailor them for your individual needs and how to best get them out to your communities. Is that fair?
And then I would say, I think I brought this up in our meeting, is boots on the ground. Like when things get posted for events, I walk right by those signs, I don't even read them. But when they come into my office and hand me the flyer, then I'm engaged. And so walking into businesses and saying, this is what's happening, here's a flyer with all the dates. It engages the business owner, but it also has an opportunity to engage the employees of those businesses that are being affected by all of the decisions we're making. And so I think it's, kind of spider webbing into a lot of different communities that we probably need to, bring into the conversation.
And the old time standing in front of the post office.
Yeah.
Someone there for
There
a
you
couple
go.
hours in front of the post office, you've got a lot of people going in and out. Don't do it on a day when there's a raffle sale. But yeah.
A banner at the chain link fence, that's another one. I read those. I don't read the papers much. I read those.
Well, there's no substitute for face-to-face conversations and
Yeah.
finding ways to meet people where they're
Well,
at.
it allows
Great.
people to ask questions as well in real time and kind of get a sense of what this is. If we just post it somewhere and there's no context, people are gonna just walk right by it, or really not understand how they're related to what's being asked or decided.
Such a great point. And that's good. Jim and then.
Had a comment and question, maybe a proposal. Comment is, as I think of this community, the backbone really, I think, are the nonprofits. The incredible web of nonprofits we have here that accomplish so many things for this community. And it's part of what's getting lost because of the fact that we have fewer long-term residents here. My question was, is there a role that the nonprofit sector has been figured into any of these plans? And if not, should it be? And thirdly, the suggestion, as far as getting the word out, maybe the community foundation would be willing to put some info out
For all the nonprofits and look at their stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've already started, that's a great question and comment. We've already started with doing some like individual plan and compass navigation presentations to some organizations, but we do, as Miles said, we're kind of in a soft launch period now, and our really like big outreach push will be this summer. And on the list is to work with Lauren at the Community Foundation to try to do like a business after hours kind of style nonprofit workshop event about this process to really engage all of those leaders in this process as well. So we want to do that with nonprofits. We really want to do it with businesses in the chamber, and it's going to be, we're going to be out in front of the post office. We're going to be in the newspaper. We're going to be on the radio. Like we plan to take a really broad, big approach of being out in the community, but also hosting some events. So while we're working on the scheduling and details for that now, at our next meeting in June would be like, you have that brochure about all the lineup and this process instead of the compass at that meeting to see where we'll be. But any ideas to inform that is great. And you're right about nonprofits. You really got it.
And if you're on a nonprofit board, talk to your board and say, I want to get an agenda item to get staff. I was at the Rotary today, Gunnison, Crested, Butte area realtors tomorrow. And we will go anywhere. And so, yes, we'll do it, but as ambassadors, if you're on a non-for-profit board or any organization, talk to your members and get us on the agenda. Help us.
That's a great part of the ambassador toolkit is we will take this show on the road and meet your board wherever and whenever. So just let us know. And Danica.
Oh, I just want to say, if you guys want to use rumors as a meet and greet, or we have like town hall, political candidates come, but you guys could like do that sometime, maybe in the off season, engage the locals that are here.
That's fantastic. If you did hear great. Yeah, we heard a great idea from our council of including like kind of council office hours as part of this outreach too. And that's a great idea. So thank you for sharing that.
I'll keep it quick, but I can let all of the conversation about the paper go by without ensuring that, yeah, the radio is always, a go-to outlet. We're just, we're so lucky to have these foundational, avenues like the paper, like the radio that everybody listens to, that everybody, flips open and show, whether it's actually taking a spot to like give an overview as to where these plans are, on a show, that's always an opportunity. And just like during our public service announcements that get read like multiple times a day. So.
Sorry, I really appreciate all of these great ideas, and at the end of the compass, we had a great comment in our draft plan survey of, if you haven't heard the term community compass, you've been living under a rock. And that's hopefully the goal again for this process. So as we develop this plan, please send me and our team any ideas or things, because we really want to take a big comprehensive approach to outreach, because as Troy said, it's always the biggest challenge. But we're really willing to pivot and try new things and make sure we people hear from us.
Yeah, and not only is it the biggest challenge, it's one of those things, it takes consistent work of pushing that rock. And so if we can get into a cadence of monthly updates with the paper, with the radio station, to just make sure there is regular outreach and that this message is consistently carried forward, it's not going to be one of those things that we check the box on. It's going to be consistent effort, and it takes all of us, and you all will be really important partners in that too. So, thank you. What other questions on the plans or the process? Excellent. Well, we've got breakouts, and the breakouts always go faster than anyone can anticipate. So let's move straight into those, and we'll have more opportunity to talk about process and individual plans. But for our breakout exercise, what we want to do, like Jesse was saying, is use the historic preservation plan and the public policy toolkit, we're calling it, as a model for understanding how do we look at those tools and use them to deliver the things we want more of and less of the things we want less of. So the purpose of the breakouts today is really going to be identifying what those tools are and then how we use them. And if we pull a lever this much or turn a dial this much, how does that not only ripple out into some of the other plans, but the other communities that we're going to need to be partnering with in the Upper Valley. So as we start to map these tools, there are going to be a lot of interconnections. and there's going to be potential opportunities and also a lot of different trade-offs. So as we go through this exercise, we'll be thinking about if we pull this lever this much, what does it do to the rest of the tools? What does it do to the other tools and the other plans? So we're going to begin to map that out, and we're going to be using examples from historic preservation to do that. We were looking at transportation, and we didn't want to confuse things with this. The good news with all of these breakouts is that at least one person in each group will have gone through this exercise already with Jesse and the historic preservation team. So we're just gathering a bigger sample size on it. So we'll have a lot of guides in our breakout sessions to understand how we can use these different tools. And so this is my hand off to Troy, and I don't want to steal any thunder, but think of it as a DJ mixing board. You know, if you fine tune all of the different inputs to get that perfect sound that you like. So I'll let Troy walk us through our examples, and I'll let him be the DJ on this one.
And this will apply to every single plan. So this is a common tool in public policy. It's called a policy profile, but these are really the tools we have to develop and implement whatever strategy each committee and the community goes after. So think of it as a mixing board to which you adjust the noise to create the music or sound you want. And these are the different policy tools. And so it looks very complicated. Let's break it down. Who has my next slide? So there's really 4 set of tools for preservation, and it doesn't want to move forward, or does it?
There you go.
There we go. And so think of it as more restrictive, less restrictive, right? You're dialing up the public policy or pushing it down, right? For parking, we're kind of in the middle, because if you think of true urban places, they charge for parking and they're much more aggressive. In suburban environments, there's no parking regulations at all. So we have a policy tool that you can decide where you want to be more restrictive or less restrictive. So we want to have this conversation as we launch preservation. We had an exercise with the preservation committee. We're going to do this with the public over the next 2 weeks. Professional architects later this week. And I don't know if an attorney showed up, but we invited every land use attorney. As well as contractors of where on the sound mixing board do you want the policy to be? So the first set is really local designation, and this gets wonky really fast if you're into preservation and historic requirements of the National Park Service and us being compliant with them as a local government, as certified local government. So under the local designation, you have a dial being more restrictive, less restrictive on the period of significance. So the town has decided a long time ago that we have a period of significance of 1952, right? You could have no period of significance. You have one period of significance or multiple periods of significance. And there's examples of multiple periods of significance all over the country, from Savannah to other Breckenridge and other places have multiple designations, and the design standards and guidelines are correlated to those periods of significance. Right now, we're saying everything's going to look forever like 1952 in this picturesque mining town. I think there's been history since then. I think became a ski town. All of us, very few of us were here before 1952. Raise your hand if you were in this town in 1952. Right, so we all have a history. And so we think that's valuable enough? Is it reflected in our architecture? So that's the period of significance. You have multiple or none. And so where on the dial does that go? And then the local boundaries, right? The local boundary is really our jurisdictional boundary and what we want to interpret. And that's not necessarily the same as the National Historic District itself, right? So we have buildings in an identified historic district, but we actually use a local boundary that is the entire town. So the entire town is under that 1952 period of significance architectural guidelines in terms of what is Beaux-Arts enforcing that council decided on. Council decided in 1952, had the zoning organization adopted the design standards and guidelines town-wide. Beaux-Arts enforces that for the town council. You can have different, you don't have to be town-wide boundary. You could match that historic district to the local boundary to the historic district. Or you could be, is this Breckenridge? Where the local boundary is slightly larger and maybe deals with transitions between local architecture, modern architecture, contemporary architecture, and the district itself. There's flexibility to that. right? What does the committee want to do? But what is appropriate for Crested Butte, given all the other challenges that these other committees also need to deal with? Next slide. Next are regulations, right? What do we do in zoning? What are our design standards and guidelines? What are our demolition ordinances requiring? We're pretty aggressive currently. From a town perspective, right? We limit floor area ratio that has preserved the character of the town, probably one of the most best things this town ever did. We also limit yard and bulk, that's the height and setbacks of the buildings. And it's pretty restrictive when you compare it to other communities. Similarly, and I don't think this is our current policy. It's actually should be down here. What our demolition ordinance is, right? You can be very strong in enforcing and protecting those buildings. Right now, we have a demolition ordinance, so no regulation, we govern demolition. We really have economic disincentives, and we noticed that last night only for the newer parts of town. We don't actually protect our historic district as well as we protect outside of the historic district. And we learned that sort of the last 2 weeks. But economic disincentive, if you want to build a house bigger than what is being proposed to demolish, you have to put in an accessory dwelling unit. That's an economic disincentive to demolition, right? That's currently what we have. We don't have the world's greatest demolition by neglect ordinance. So if an owner willfully neglects a building and lets it age over time, we have one right on the corner over here that we're trying to enforce, but the ordinance isn't very strong. So where on the dial should we play with the demolition rules? That's up for grabs and discussion in the preservation plan. Next slide. Our design standards and guidelines, which are different than the zoning, right? Architectural diversity and materials, right? You can have no architectural requirement, but we have 1952. And then you can have multiple style guidelines. In other words, instead of just 1952 as the style, they're guidelines and they're suggestions, not necessarily standards. You then create standards. Right, you have multiple architectural styles and standards. So if we have another period of significance, or we choose to give more flexibility outside of the historic core, we might dial it down. Right now, we have a single style that really are a combination of standards, requirements, and guidelines, which are suggestions. Right, those are as from our architectural standards and guidelines. And I think this is what we're hearing from the community is, and I'm not sure look is the fair statement, because we actually have pretty good architectural diversity. They certainly feel the same. If you go to Teotali tracks, they feel the same. And we heard that clearly through Compass. Where on the dial should we play with this? Right, and we're going to be working with the community, getting feedback, but we want you at the tables to have an honest conversation of what is appropriate for you. We're going to create multiple alternatives. We'll come back to the preservation committee and vet that, and then go to BOZAR and council for sort of direction. Next slide. And then lastly, incentives. What do we do to incent good behavior, right? In terms of rewarding, is it always a stick, or should government play an incentive? And incentives from a funding perspective, we really don't have an incentive today in any way for either preservation strategies. We could, if they do something right and they follow the design standards guidelines, we can accelerate that review. We could give administrative review to staff. So if everything's coming in and staff compares that against the guidelines, you could accelerate everything and just give staff permission to grant it if they do it well. If they do it poorly, they go to BOZA. That's one example of an incentive. Or you could go all in like Louisville. Louisville actually passed a sales tax, a 1/8 sales tax that they use funding to actually fund the preservation of these buildings. They give incredible incentives. It's probably the only one of its kind in the state. And I was fortunate enough to run it. And it was a lot of money that we would give homeowners to preserve the character of their buildings. And so that's going all in on incentives. Conversely, we could just use regulatory incentives. So if we want density bonuses or something for affordable housing, right? This is where we can get the market to do something where we don't have the funding to do it, right? We can play with the setbacks. We can play with the height. We can also play with the FAR or the allowed uses within it. Those are all tools that you can use. So I think the point of this exercise is I need a break to enjoy the results of my coffee drinking. B, you're gonna get together and have honest conversations about this. Think of it from a climate action perspective, think of it from a transportation perspective, think of it as a preservation issue. All of these are really, really important, and bring your passion and hearts to the dialogue. And that's what we're gonna break apart to do. Is that right, Mel?
So just to go over some quick directions, and when we break out, we will have a short break to go to the bathroom and all that. But we're gonna split into 4 teams. I'll put the teams on the sides, and each team is gonna have a big board of this blank mixing board. And we have some directions for the group. And first, we want you to lean in on the preservation plan committee members on your group to answer any clarifying questions, kind of go over and ground your group as a whole in the board. As a next step, before you jump into drawing where your mixing board is, first we want you to identify where do you see interconnections, opportunities, or potential trade-offs between the different plans. So we have sticky notes, or you can use markers and crayons, and you can draw on, I think this category could intersect with climate action or transportation. And you don't need to dive into like, they need to use this exact material. We want to see those big picture intersections or potential opportunities for trade-offs. Next, as a team, we want you to work through how would you adjust those levers and dials? Where is your mixing board? And lastly, this is most important to prepare for the share out. How does where your mixing board ended up reflect the values of the compass? So as a team, remember, you might say, I really want this because I want this. How can you work together to really come back to those values Ian talked about earlier of connected, authentic, accountable, and bold? We also put the preservation plan success measures on each of those boards, and we want you to prepare to share where did you land and how does that reflect the compass? So Miles, do you want to talk through just timing?
Sure, absolutely. And Mel did a great job of explaining that. And these policy toolkits are going to be developed for each and every plan. Transportation has one. This is obviously historic preservation, climate action, and the community plan will all have them. So this will be a tool that we use to show where those interconnections are. So this isn't the first time or the last time I should say, you're gonna see this. So what we wanna do is take about 35 minutes to break out into groups, and we'll put those assignments up in a second. But then we're gonna report out. And so we're gonna take 5 minutes per breakout group to really share your key takeaways. And then we'll have 5 minutes after that for us just to discuss where were those big common themes. So let's get to it, because these groups always go quickly. And group 1 is gonna be up here. Group 2, and you can see the assignments here, will be in the back corner. Group 3, I believe, is over here in the corner by Maddie. And then group 4 will be out across the hall in meeting room junior, which is where lunch will be, but it doesn't mean group 4 is gonna get first crack at our lunch. We're gonna come back here and report out first. So we'll make sure the group 4s don't get any snacks early. And we'll give you detailed instructions when we get broken out. So let's take 5 and have a bio break, and then we'll get into groups.
Go.
This year was, yeah. Yeah. You know, all right, I saw anything better. Oh, man, yeah. How?
Sorry.
Some information I want.
I feel like.
Yeah, you're okay.
They're all.
Oh, yeah.
Right now, it's. First, 100 square feet.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, what is it?
everything essentially. All of them are really good. You have to do it, and I think we got to put your time in, but I appreciate how well organized, thought out, we're really good here. We're gonna talk about it later. You do that at the show, right? Yeah. Good job. Getting all I don't want everyone doing something. No worries. Yeah, you want to do it. Well, so I just, I guess next month, re-up on my car. I
don't have that many bags. I like that.
He's 9 years. So you saw, it's kind of got to here in some ways. It's expectations. Like that, deep learning. Still has. You gotta deal with that. Have that. So I was like, nobody likes that.
So just so you know,
It's such nice. Six different things. Make strides.
two
Nobody, like, yeah, all 7 members. Last night. It's at you know. And with that, we have John Meyer. We had a comment. Jim Moore. And like all of no, I told you. That's definitely. Probably. It's hard, like, I don't wanna get. It's also like, there's a lot to be done. I don't know, it's tough to figure out how. Exactly, balance, you I don't know. Why give up one good opportunity?
How that impacted.
Yeah, and.
On all of these, the intensity of the bass or the treble might be turned up or down a little bit on some of the different examples, but the overall soundboard is really, really similar in some of those trends. So this input from you all is going to be a huge help to Jesse and the historic preservation team as they really dig into these toolkits. And as you all saw from the breakouts, we could have probably spent 3 hours on these, but this high level feedback and this larger sample size is going to be really, really helpful for the historic preservation team. And we're going to respond in kind to the other plans that are coming up and provide them with similar guidance as we work through the process. So enough from me. What stood out to you all as key takeaways from today, whether it's the report outs or the session in general?
I was encouraged by the thoughts on incentives to get some of these things done, which are much needed. One incentive we talked about as far as creating more density, we talked about we make the yard smaller, et cetera. One option of that is community neighborhood gathering places. So you could have smaller lots for each of the denser housing units, but have a community gathering place.
That's a really good point, how our land use choices reflect our values.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much. What other key takeaways?
Maybe that different levels of focus for each of these boundaries, like for the historic district, to really be held year in year and potentially, have higher restrictions around what can change and what can be developed but then with more and more flexibility for, say, like, to just bring the balance into play of not just putting a wide swath over all of CB, like keep it the way it is, to consider these other areas that we really need to focus on. Yeah.
It's a great line. Thank you. Anything else?
I think that, something that stands out to me is that within each of these or many of these, there's a lot of creative solutions. So it seems to me it's not, just about moving the dial and even putting a few restrictions here and there, but even, Jim's example, to make these really work as we move the dials, those very creative solutions are key to the success of the movement of the dial.
Great.
Piggyback on that. I think I found the dial concept a little frustrating because it forced a commitment to a particular space rather than multiple solutions to a particular question, which I think is really probably what we're going to find is the landing spot for most people, right? There's going to be multiple answers to each one. And so I liked that you said that. Like opening it up a little bit more. I like that some people put like multiple stickers. I'm imagining like everyone's was a different sticker, and that kind of gave us a really good perspective on where the bulk of the people were in each particular question, which was, I think, a nice representation of the conversations.
That's a great point.
Yeah, Golford, Sandy, it was hard for our group to really dig into the specifics of the dials, because I think some were really into the historic preservation plan, where others we heard like, well, why do you want my feedback? I was on transportation. And I think taking a step back, it was actually really helpful to start with identifying the intersections between the plans, because while it came up naturally, like, oh yeah, I think materials that impacts climate, or incentives and regulations that impacts the KD plan, but identifying how like the authenticity and the feel and look of our built environment really impacts our pedestrian experience and how we move around the town and our community connectivity in that way. So I thought that was really helpful, even though you may have, it was challenging to work through the toolkit.
And to use the music analogy again, I think it does vary depending on if you're listening to classical or jazz. I mean, those dials are going to need to change. So I think that's really good feedback and requires creative solutions. Yeah, Andrew.
I think we have an incredible group of people in this room. Many of them have been elected to Beaux-Arts and to town council. I think our challenge is to engage the community in how to become part of this discussion, right? And some people won't be part of the discussion and they won't be engaged and they'll complain whenever you put something in the paper. And that's just what's gonna happen, but we need to do our best effort to be ambassadors. Paul said, and to get out there and talk, and not just wait for somebody to come to us, but engage them, go and say, hey, we're talking about this stuff. Do you have, and they may have a completely different opinion than us. Let's do that.
Yeah.
But that's the true spirit of community, right? You know, is to go out there.
Exactly. And it's gonna take a community and it starts here. Let us know what you need and we'll let you know as we're gonna be out in the community having events. We may need to make some compass badges so the navigation committee is identifiable out there, but it's gonna take constant effort for sure.
We have a uniform. I think this really showed me and all, listening to everyone's ideas, especially in that group. They were very specific ideas and these are very broad concepts. And I think that it needs to be distilled down to what zone do things belong in? Where does that density go? Where do we have those potentials for development? Where has that ship already sailed and we really don't have anything to do with that neighborhood except maybe like the historic core protected, or even the new zone, it's already built out, we can't change that, you know? But where can we get specific about how these concepts apply to the different areas in our town? I think is like the next step from here, going forward for the historic preservation plan and incorporating all those good ideas, but thinking about where they belong and what those ideas mean, and like what parts of our zoning code need to be looked at, not just like big wash over the whole thing, but like, let's focus in on the materials and talk, you know, really hard about how that rule set may change. Let's look at in our group a little bit, talking about the C zone and how could that change? Because there's more development to be done there, there's more empty lots, you know, so I think moving towards the specifics is gonna be really important and away from the big concepts in this exercise.
Wanted to piggyback on that comment, like, let's take that and make sure we're pairing that too with requests for, you know, maybe clarifying regulation and simplifying rules and regulations. So we have to both combine, like making specific tailored solutions to each zone district while also not making our codes so complicated that everyone struggles to understand it.
Can I make a quick comment, piggybacking on both of these, which is one of the things that I was having the same frustration because they're like really big concepts and I was trying to, you know, like really pin down actual ideas of like, what does this really mean and how do you unpack this? But one of the things that I sort of passively heard within our group is that there were certain things said to me, and this happens with a lot of us who are in Beaux-Arts. We hear people say things that are not actually true to what the guidelines or the zoning, there's just like a general misunderstanding. And so there was a little bit of that at play sometimes when we got into a discussion, it's just not understanding maybe some of the context as to like, this is already, you know, new materials is already, there's already something in place for that introduction to happen. And so having those, just even like a little bit of knowledge coming in for everyone, because obviously I benefit from that knowledge because I use it every day, but not everybody else does. So I don't know how to work that into these discussions, but it can help with context, which sometimes gets a little washed out with these broad discussions.
Yeah. And I think that's gonna be something we wanna balance as we work through this process, the complexity with that context and make sure there's space for education.
Right, but I do think it was helpful, like, it seemed like there was a proposal on each team. Is that true? Like, we started to say stuff and then Eric was like, well, actually, this, you know, but
Exactly.
he actually was the code, and so that was good.
And that was very intentional in making sure there was that context just amongst our breakout groups. Well, and we can continue this as well. There's food in the other room. And I know it's getting to be 12:30 and everybody's probably getting hungry. If you want, we can continue this discussion. Let's break bread and then come back in if you can, and we can continue the discussion, have some informal Q&A. We don't have any members of the public on our Zoom today, so no need for public comment. Just wanted to make sure we acknowledge that. Any final thoughts before we eat some food, then convene or not, like it's totally optional. Well, thank you all so much for being here. Let's break some bread and we'll come back.